Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Patrick here, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of the Amplify Bible Study. You can find all the information about the study over on the website, amplifybiblestudy.com. All the past audio messages are there, plus the links to get them from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor FM. Also, the YouTube channel is there. And also, please remember to go and join that Facebook group to get involved in the discussion for the Bible study. We are going to continue our look at the book of Numbers today. Such a cool section we are in. And today, yes, we get the talking donkey today. And it's comical, but it's also a little bit tragic as we look at this because we're going to see why I say it's tragic as we look at Balaam and how he reacts to what is happening here with the donkey. So let's go ahead and dive in. We are in Numbers. We're in chapter 22. If you want to get caught up and go back and watch the first section of chapter 22 or listen to the first section of chapter 22 so you can get the behind the stories of who it is we're dealing with here in Balaam and Balak and who they are and their relationship of what's going on. You can go back and listen to last week's episode if you haven't already done so. That will give you an idea of what's happening. But let's go ahead and dive in. We're at chapter 22 of Numbers, and we're going to start at verse 22, actually. I use the CSB translation, so the words might be a little bit different than what yours say, but the meaning, I believe, is the same. So don't get too thrown off if it doesn't say exactly what it is you're saying as you follow along. It says, "But God was incensed that Balaam was going, and an angel of the Lord took his stand on the path opposite to him. Balaam was riding his donkey, and 2 servants were with him." So a quick recap of what's happening. Balaam had asked God to go with these representatives from Moab, and God said, no, you don't have to go. But then Balaam went back to God, and God said, okay, you can go, but you can only say what I tell you to say. And we talked about this idea of permissive will, which is what God is showing here. When we last left Balaam, God was giving him this permissive will. But then we read here, but God was incensed, or God was angry that Balaam went. Well, if God gave him permission to go, why would God be angry that he went? This seems like a contradiction, but it actually is not. And the reason it's not is because in God's permissive will, he will sometimes say, okay, go ahead, do what you want to do. Go ahead and do what you want to do, even though you know it is not in my will. It is not what I want you to do. He will allow you to do it anyway. But that doesn't mean he's going to get angry, not going to get angry when you decide to do it. See, Balaam knew all along what God's will was, yet he still decided to go against what God's will is. God will tell us that we're allowed to do something. God will say, okay, go ahead and do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean we should do it. See, there's a difference between being led by God or being called by God to do something versus basically pleading with God to do something that's against his will, and he says, okay, we're going to allow you to do it. There's a huge difference there. And I want you to think of, okay, what I'm talking about here, and look at the difference between what God does here and what he does with Jonah. Because with Jonah, it was clear God's will. God was calling Jonah to go to Nineveh. And it was absolutely clear that that is what his intention and that is what his purpose for Jonah was. But here, God never calls Balaam to go with the Moabites. He simply says, you can go, but you must do this. You must follow, and you must say only what I tell you to say. Now, there is some speculation, no biblical evidence for it, but there's some speculation among theologians that the reason that God gets incensed or angry here is because Balaam actually says something that is not what God tells him to say. But once again, there's no biblical evidence to back that up. But that is one of the theories out there as to why God is angry here. But I think it's more along the lines of just because he says and gives you the permission from his permissive will to do it, doesn't mean that you still don't have the choice not to do it. So let's move on. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing on the path with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the path and went into the field. So Balaam hit her to return her to the path. Pause here real quick, because this is the first reference we see as the donkey being a female. And this is an important point. It's an important little detail, because a female donkey would have been lower in status for both usefulness and value compared to what a male donkey would be. So we see, as he's going down the road, the donkey sees the angel of the Lord standing there, veers off to the road, and Balaam beats her. Let's continue. Verse 24. Then the angel of the Lord stood on a narrow passage between the vineyards, with a stone wall on either side. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord and pressed herself against the wall, squeezing Balaam's foot against it. So he hit her again. The angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam. So he became furious and beat the donkey with his stick. See, what Balaam thinks is going on here, and what Balaam thinks is happening, is the donkey's just being stubborn. Because donkeys, even up to today, have a reputation for being very stubborn field animals. So that's what he thinks is going on here. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she asked Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times?" Now, notice what the donkey says throughout this entire passage, throughout this entire section. The donkey doesn't give prophecy. The donkey doesn't speak for the Lord. The donkey is simply saying something that any animal would say in this situation. And also notice that Balaam doesn't seem too surprised that the donkey is talking either. Interesting points here. Balaam answered the donkey, "You make me look like a fool. If I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you now." But the donkey said, "Am I not the donkey you've ridden all your life until today? Have I ever treated you this way before?" "No," Balaam replied. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the path with a drawn sword in his hand. Balaam knelt down low and bowed in worship to his face. Now, let's remember and go back to last week real quick. What kind of diviner was Balaam? He was an animal diviner. He used animals as part of his divination process. Yet here we see what many consider to be the dumbest animal on the planet, the dumbest beast of the field on the planet, able to see God right in front of her, while Balaam can't. Very interesting. Very, very interesting thing to look at here, right? 3 times, this supposedly dumb animal is trying to protect Balaam from the angel of the Lord with a drawn sword there. 3 times she's trying to protect him against God's punishment for what he's doing. And 3 times he beats her for it because he can't see what is right in front of him. Now, you know what question I'm about to ask. You know what question I'm going to want an answer to down in the comments in that private Facebook group as we talk about this. What signs in your life is God using to protect you from his punishment that you're ignoring? What signs is God throwing out there that you are too blind to see because of something that you're doing? It's a very personal, deep question to think about and answer. But we have to think on this term. We have to think on these levels as to what is it that God is using. What donkey is in your life that is trying to pull you away from that punishment, but you're just ignoring it. Or worse yet, you're abusing it and beating it because it's trying to pull you away. Let's continue. Then the angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I came out to oppose you because I consider what you are doing to be evil. The donkey saw me and turned away from me 3 times. If she had not turned away from me, I would have killed you by now and let her live." God lays it out right there, flat out tells Balaam, the donkey saw you, the donkey was protecting you, and you would be dead right now if it wasn't for her. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the path to confront me. And now, if it is evil in your sight, I will go back." Now, this one might lead one to believe that Balaam is actually repenting here, that he actually sees the error of his ways, that he understands the seriousness of his actions against God, and he's going to go back and be a godly person. But we're going to see later in the chapters, this is absolutely not the case. Absolutely not the case. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you are to say only what I tell you." So Balaam went with Balak's officials. You would only say what I'm going to tell you. This sums up the entire chapter right here in this one verse. Balaam would not be able to utter the curses he had fully planned on uttering against Israel, because the price had been reached. He had been bought, and he was fully planning on uttering these curses. Instead, he would only be able to say what God told him to say. And surprisingly, he would become an instrument that God uses to bless Israel. He now understands how he's going to be used. He now understands the word of the Lord would give, the word that the Lord will give to him. He understands this now. So let's continue. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moabite city in Onron border at the edge of his territory. Balak asked Balaam, "Did I not send for you an urgent summons? Why didn't you come to me? Am I really not able to reward you?" Think about this one time. Balak is so distressed, he actually goes out to meet Balaam. He runs out there to meet him and says, he's basically saying, "What took you so long? Why did it take you so long?" Balaam said to him, "Look, I have come to you, but I cannot say anything I want. I must utter only the message that God puts in my mouth." The words, "I must only say the message that God puts in my mouth," indicate that what is about to come out of Balaam's mouth will be some type of divine revelation. Because look what he says, "I can't come and just say anything I want." And this is ordinarily what he would do. See, ordinarily Balaam would come and do one of these divinations, do one of these grand things that Balak is wanting him to do, say whatever pleased him when the price is right, and then he believed that the will of God would just somehow or the will of the gods, I should say, the will of the gods that he is doing this with will somehow just miraculously fall in line with what he's saying. But he understands that this will not be the case this time. He understands and grasps this, that he's only going to be able to deliver the words that God wants him to deliver. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Karathi Hutzah. Close enough, I guess. Balak sacrificed cattle, sheep, and goats, and sent for Balaam and the officials who were with him. In the morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him to Bonmoth Baal. From there, he saw the outskirt of the people's camp. So they went, they did pagan worshiping. These pagan sacrifices, because it certainly wasn't in the name of Yahweh that they were doing these sacrifices. So they go out and do these pagan sacrifices. Then Balak brings Balaam to the edge of the camp where he is supposed to curse the Israelites. He takes them right to the outskirts of the camp. And that's where we're going to stop this week. So to this week's question, and I will only go back to it again, what donkey is God putting in your life? What is God using to help protect you from his punishment that you continue to ignore? What is God using to pull you away from the path that you're on, the path that is wrong for you and is against him, that you continue to beat and try to pull back onto that wrong path? Amplify Bible Studies, where you can find all the information about all the studies. Remember, if you have a question or anything like that, you can ask it over in the private Facebook group, or you can email amplifybible@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions for you. And until next week, have a great, great week, and go out and make those disciples for Christ. Later, everybody.